arena of death, we'll witness two colossal flying titans engage in a bloody battle that will determine who is the ruler of the skies. On one end, a titan with a literal thirst for blood, the force of darkness made flesh, a monster armed with hellish weapons destined to inflict nothing else but pain, Titanus Camazotz. On the other end, the angriest bird of all time, the monster known for its supersonic speeds, wild abilities, and an unpredictable nature, Titanus Rodan. Today in the analysis platform, we will analyze all battle attributes one by one, laying bare all their strengths, weaknesses, weapons, compiling all this data in a real simulator that will reveal which of these titans will live and who deserves to die. This is Fire versus Darkness, Predator versus Predator, Rodan versus Titanus Camazotz. To generate an accurate battle simulation, we first must take into account both of these titans' corporal attributes and, more importantly, size. By looking at a 3D scan of both of these titans, we see that they differ greatly in terms of wingspan. Starting with Rodan, we find that most of his corporal mass is found on its wings, making up a wingspan that covers a whopping 871 feet. Despite this animal's standing height is rather short, only standing at 154 feet while slouched. Camazotz, on the other hand, may have a slight advantage in terms of height, but is dwarfed by Rodan in terms of wingspan. However, Camazotz does seem to have a greater amount of body mass if we ignore the wings. This will be important to account for whenever these titans are in close combat. In this face-off, Goji Center collaborated with Beasttopia, lending us their massive titan viewing facility so we can have a close look at these titans. Now that we are acquainted with their physical proportions, let us now enter the analysis platform and compare their attributes. Durability. How much damage can these titans sustain, and how well are their bodies built to withstand punishment? Something important to note about Rodan is that it is of biovolcanic nature, meaning that its biology has many common denominators with volcanic attributes. The best example of this being its outer layer of armor, which is made up of hardened magma, a result of its many years in hibernation inside volcanoes. This thick layer of rock is seen to be quite resistant to shock and blast weapons such as high-caliber projectiles, missiles, and almost immune to superheated weaponry. Also, this creature seems to be able to recover quite well from deep puncture wounds. After he was impaled by Mothra, for example, Rodan was able to fly well once again, enough for him to be confident enough to even challenge Godzilla afterwards. But perhaps the best example of how this animal can withstand other types of damage was the fact that even after Godzilla's superheated thermonuclear pulse was emitted, Rodan, who was still somewhere around here, still survived. Now, granted, he was a lot further from the blast than Ghidorah, but he still remained unscathed. Camazotz, on the other hand, also possesses armor as well, except it's composed differently. From what we can see here, our best guess is that this plate armor must have been composed of some chitinous or keratin-like material. Lightweight enough for Camazotz to fly, but resistant enough to withstand heavy blows from titans such as Kong. Furthermore, this animal also has thick layers of fur in key areas on its back and around the neck, almost similar to a lion's mane, which in many cases serves as a buffer to guard its neck against attacks. Although its body is resistant to heavy blows, its wings are a different story. There is a clear visual indication that suggests that Camazotz's wings are prone to tearing. These leathery wings, for instance, have already sustained damage before, remained functional, but are not too far away from being too damaged to be used for flight. If these, for whatever reason, are damaged further, too much air will pass through these gaps, making flight a lot more difficult. Especially since this animal's proportions already make it difficult for this animal to sustain flight. Both animals' body armor is strong, but since hair and leather are more prone to catching on fire, and taking into account Rodan's biovolcanic nature, Rodan takes an edge when it comes to overall corporal durability. Overall speed. It is only natural to automatically assume that two airborne creatures are already very fast when it comes to speed. But in this battle, getting from point A to point B faster than your opponent can potentially be vital. Perhaps the most widely known attribute of Titanus Rodan is its ability to fly at supersonic speeds, a lot faster than the speed of sound. This velocity goes as far as triggering a phenomenon known as a cyclonic drift stream. As Rodan makes its way past a certain area, the air currents around him are manipulated greatly by his gigantic mass breaking through the air, the result being a devastating shockwave that is caused while he's traveling at top speed. This would cause heavy turbulence and destruction to any landform or space around him, not only making his flying speed a useful ability, but also a potential weapon. By looking at the opponent's build, there are many clues that give us a good idea as to how fast this animal can fly, and it's unfortunately not optimal in comparison to Rodan. Why? The evidence can be found on its wings. Two things. Because of the rough leathery texture on its wings, holes, and spikes, this will create a detrimental effect known as drag, which inhibits this animal from reaching supersonic speeds, much less anything close to Rodan. In addition to that, this animal's fur and overall shape would also cause this animal to slow down, in contrast to Rodan's build, which easily cuts through the air, allowing him to travel much faster. Camazotz, however, is a confident navigator through the air given its echolocation, but flight alone won't win you this fight. In terms of overall speed, one Titan holds a clear edge thanks to its more appropriate build, and that is Titanus Rodan. Maneuverability. Moving fast is one thing, but moving effectively and with purpose may prove even more important. This attribute basically determines how well a creature moves its body or how agile it is during combat. Rodan has one maneuver in particular that we'd like to focus on: the barrel roll. This is usually done in midair, rotating its body 360 degrees repeatedly while leveraging its massive wingspan to create a wide kill zone. Anything impacting these superheated hardened wings would get hit violently, turning this maneuver into yet another weapon. Rodan has also been seen to be able to easily move itself in all three axes: up, down, sideways, backwards, without compromising its balance. Moving in this fashion while being a massive Titan will most definitely prove helpful in difficult terrain. More on this later. We've only seen Camazotz in action in a graphic novel, so determining its agility will be quite difficult, making us resort to different clues. 2 to be exact. The developers of this monster mentioned that this creature is a Bat Titan, meaning that they share many attributes with their real-life counterparts, one being their shortened wings. Now, this may look like a disadvantage, and it is in terms of speed, but having shorter and wider wings allows the creature to stop quickly in midair and make quick turns. Bats don't really have tails, but this one does. Tails serve as a directional aid on most ground animals. Camazotz would use this long tail to further help it maneuver, but not only that, this tail can also be used as a weapon. But to use it effectively, Camazotz must first position its body accurately in order to use it. This in turn tells us that this Titan knows how to move around, make quick turns, and position himself accurately in order to deploy its weapons. Both Titans in this case leverage their distinct maneuverability to inflict damage. For this reason, both Rodan and Camazotz will stand equal when it comes to this attribute. Moving around better than your opponent is good for combat only if terrain benefits you. Now is an appropriate time to figure out where exactly this battle is most likely to take place. Terrain adaptability. As our battle stats begin to take form in our analysis platform, we need to start figuring out where this fight has a higher chance of happening and who will have the edge. Something to note about Camazotz is that this is a Titan that absolutely hates the sun, meaning that Rodan will most likely not run into Camazotz under very well-lit conditions. Rodan does not seem to be bothered by too much light or too much darkness, but since Camazotz really won't be found unless he's in darkness or dim environments, this restricts the battleground to some specific areas. A plausible battleground for these two to encounter each other on would potentially be in one of the open cavernous pockets leading to the hollow earth. It is known that both Titanus Camazotz and Rodan are no strangers to these sorts of settings. Rodan being a Titan that is accustomed to crawling through volcanic vents, and Camazotz being a Titan that dwells in large cavernous locations leading to the hollow earth. That is, any dark areas found in this biome. So, in our battle simulation, Rodan will likely run into Camazotz while traveling through old volcanic vents, leading to a more ample air pocket near the center of the Earth. But the main question, which of these Titans will have the edge in this specific battleground? Although Rodan and Camazotz both stood equal in maneuverability, we must also again mention that Camazotz relies heavily on an ability known as echolocation. This animal can emit pulses to the surrounding area, which then bounce back and compile into a three-dimensional visible space in his brain, allowing him to see clearly even in complete darkness. Also, it is no coincidence that this guy has shorter wings. Having a smaller wingspan will allow it to move more freely in certain tight spaces, which is useful since these wings are considerably less durable than Rodan and will do a better job at avoiding obstacles that could further damage its wings. Because these two Titans will have a higher chance of encountering each other in this location, and because Camazotz is well adapted for this sort of terrain, Titanus Camazotz will now snatch a critical edge when it comes to battle terrain. Stamina. This category will determine who can stay in this fight for a longer time, and who would be most likely to tire quickly. Beginning with Titanus Rodan, in King of the Monsters, we were able to take note of the fact that Rodan was pretty much airborne throughout the majority of the film, at least while he was on screen. Beginning from when he took off from the volcano, and only down while he was either defeated or bowing to another kaiju. Within a short span of time, Rodan took off from Isla Damara straight to Washington, D.C., where he and Ghidorah took on the U.S. military. After Madison Russell activated the Orca in Boston, Ghidorah let Rodan hold it down while he left and took care of the Orca situation. Here he encountered Godzilla and Mothra. Rodan would again have to rejoin his Alpha in a very short amount of time and have enough stamina to fight again. After being bested and critically injured, he still apparently had the energy to risk yet another fight against Godzilla. These feats aren't the only evidence that suggests that Rodan had superb stamina. Birds and pterosaur anatomy, which Rodan shared, also work in Rodan's favor. In the real world, both pterosaurs and birds have the most optimal body types to aid them in flight, but also keep themselves airborne. Both had hollow bones and air chambers in their bodies to make them lightweight and help cool down their powerful chest muscles. Rodan's fast recovery in Boston after Mothra's stinger wound stands as a testament to his fast healing ability. This would in turn continuously heal his muscles during strenuous activity, allowing him to stay in the fight longer. Camazotz, as discussed already, shares many similarities with bats. In the real world, these animals are known more for their agile abilities, but not so much as being long-distance flyers. Their heavier skeleton and less refined internal anatomy pales in comparison to that of birds. But another noteworthy factor is the condition of Camazotz's wings, as these are torn, allowing air to come through and forcing an already heavy Titan to flap his wings more frequently and with greater force to keep him airborne. In contrast to Rodan, who doesn't face this problem. In this scenario, Rodan will be the Titan who covers more ground, and Camazotz would likely try to conserve his energy, using short bursts of speed to his advantage. For this category, Rodan takes the edge for stamina. Intelligence. Here's where things get a little more interesting. And to better understand the intelligence of these creatures, we'll have to study some of their real-life counterparts or those used in reference when creating these Titans. Beginning with Rodan, we know that he's a shrewd Titan with a tendency to be a little reckless. However, we must mention that this guy shares many characteristics with birds of prey. In the real world, these are ranked among the most intelligent creatures in the world, problem solvers, and with the cognitive ability to learn and put certain pieces of evidence together. But can it handle keeping his mental composure? Well, unfortunately, this guy has made it difficult for us to say he can. In the past, we have witnessed Rodan make rather dumb or rash decisions, such as putting himself at risk in exchange for an opportunity to attack. In 2019, we witnessed Rodan recklessly face Ghidorah, resorting to a head-on attack against a considerably much larger Titan. Another example was when he tried to take out Mothra's head in an attempt to humiliate the female alpha and missed repeatedly instead of hitting the larger chest area. In both instances, we see Rodan get bested in what would best be described as avoidable situations. Had it not been for its durability, this animal would have potentially been critically injured or even killed for its recklessness. To his merit, however, this can also be interpreted as fearlessness. Even against larger odds, Rodan wouldn't hesitate to attack, making this creature an intimidating foe. But is it enough to intimidate this thing? Apart from being scary looking, this animal proves to be a rather intelligent foe, not just on combat level, but also strategic. Let us remind you that this guy would also command these smaller creatures to do his bidding, using them as a distraction or deterrent against smaller jets so that he may focus on the main threat. In the real world, bats are said to be almost as intelligent as dolphins, can recognize familiar faces, and come up with unique strategies to effectively catch prey, and have very good memory. Similarly, Camazotz was seen to successfully best Kong by disabling his limbs during combat, which were his strongest weapons, and finding out that throwing this guy to the ground repeatedly would further weaken him at a faster rate. Later on in this episode, you'll find out that his large array of weapons will require a very smart brain to multitask and use these all at once. Both of these are very smart creatures that know how to use their weapons to maximum effectiveness, but Rodan's inability to think critically lowers the levels at which we perceive his overall intelligence, resulting in a very tight difference and a close edge for Titanus Camazotz. Auxiliary weaponry. Apart from this Titan's beak, which we will discuss in the next section, Titanus Rodan possesses a very robust set of talons armed with very sharp claws, 3 forward-facing and an opposable claw securing a strong grip. Real-world birds of prey rely on these to not only hold on to prey, but to pierce certain muscle groups that allow the prey to fight back. But one thing to take note of is that these weapons become a lot more lethal if they are mounted on a creature that can fly at supersonic speeds, meaning that all of this force would then be projected onto these small tips, making this impact a lot more lethal. In addition to these talons, we see that Rodan is also equipped with claws on his wings. These are mostly used for grappling against an opponent in midair, making it easier for this Titan to accommodate itself to then proceed using its beak. On the other hand, we see that Camazotz is equipped with similar weaponry. Now, at first glance, it is obvious that attacking Camazotz's spiked body would be a daunting task, and with good reason, given that this Titan's wings behave as a melee weapon. Any contact made by these spikes would potentially wound any Titan that flies too close to these. Its talons are also similar to Rodan's, allowing him to grip tight into an enemy as heavy as Kong and proceed to lift him up. So, apart from being dangerous, Camazotz also possesses an incredible amount of strength. But this doesn't end here. Continuing on to the posterior area of this Titan, we find this, a long, spiked tail. Earlier on, we discussed that this weapon was used for maneuverability, but it can also be used as a whip of sorts. This prehensile tool is able to quickly grab an opponent's limbs, neck, or weapons and turn their strength into a weakness. Not to mention that Camazotz will deploy this weapon when the opponent least expects it. Since Rodan won't know this tail is prehensile until it's used against him, in this category, the Vampire Titan's larger array of close-ranged weapons and the deceptive use of this tail will give Titanus Camazotz a critical edge in auxiliary weapons. Bite effectiveness. Moving up to these Titans' heads, we find that they differ greatly in anatomy and in the way they are used in combat. Immediately, we notice that Rodan does not have any teeth, but rather serrated edges, which aid in the cutting of Titan flesh. But in order for flesh to make it to this posterior part of the mouth, the meat needs to get ripped first. How? Well, it just so happens that Rodan's beak is very similar to that of modern birds of prey. Instead of taking a bite, these animals raise their heads and violently peck down, leveraging these sharp tips which pierce the victim. Once enough meat is caught in this hook, they rip upwards. Rodan uses similar maneuvers when it comes to attacking, pecking violently at Ghidorah's chest, or this futile attempt at decapitating Mothra. This pecking maneuver allows all the impact force to be concentrated here, which will help in piercing hard, flat surface areas. Camazotz's jaws are equipped with a few but deadly long, sharp teeth. But apart from that, we must notice that this squared, wide jaw possessed by this kaiju hints that this bite is really strong. Combine all of this with force and exert it on these few sharp teeth, and we have some serious piercing power. This gets more lethal by the simple fact that Camazotz can open its mouth pretty wide, meaning that it can in fact take out a huge chunk of flesh. Sharp, pointy teeth and a spear-like beak are both more than enough to pierce through armor, but both of these Titans are equipped with some sort of defense against these strong bites. On one end, Rodan's biovolcanic anatomy may come in handy once again, once the exposed gums of Camazotz make contact with his fiery flesh. Still potentially piercing, but not for long. Rodan, on the other end, may end up trying to bite through this thick fur. As mentioned already, this thick fur may serve as a sort of cushion, slowing down a rapidly approaching sharp beak and mitigating its damage. Camazotz does have other vulnerable areas around its body, such as the chest, which is covered by this armor, but targeting these areas would force Rodan to be in a vulnerable position. Although both of these methods differ in methodology, both are effective against their respective opponents if used correctly, and both methods are similarly deterred, settling this as another draw for bite effectiveness. Special abilities. Both of these Titans will unleash forces that will literally make the battleground tremble. It is said that Rodan's biology triggers a phenomenon known as volcanoagrikinesis, meaning that as Rodan flies real close to volcanic formations, these would then erupt. Admittedly, any Titan standing close to a volcanic eruption will know better and to steer clear of the blast, but maybe they won't be able to avoid this, the thunderclap. Now, you will recall that Rodan is covered by a hardened layer of volcanic rock. Rodan uses this to hit his wings against each other, emitting an outrageously strong wave of high pressure capable of destroying any smaller creatures flying nearby, and severely disorienting any Titan that is standing or flying close by. This can manipulate the air currents that any other creature is traveling on, causing some pretty mad turbulence. Camazotz spits back with something of his own, the sonic screech. This Titan is capable of amplifying a loud scream using frequencies that not only disorient Titans, but literally hurt their brains if exposed long enough, causing Titans to retreat or become stunned. This scream is so powerful that it will be able to liquefy small animals, destroy buildings, and have similar effects of the thunderclap. But which of these is more lethal? We'll have to pay close attention to details. The damage inflicted by Rodan's thunderclap is short-lived compared to the continuous stream emitted by Camazotz. But one indicator of the strength of the shock is how these jets reacted to such impact. While Camazotz was able to put these fighter jets out of commission, they weren't necessarily destroyed like the ones close to Rodan, telling us that this shock was more lethal. Additionally, this stronger shock could be emitted repeatedly if Rodan wanted to. While Camazotz will be able to severely disorient Rodan with this screech, Rodan's thunderclap inflicts more initial damage. Not to mention that his presence alone causes alarming levels of turbulence around him. For this reason, Titanus Rodan will take the edge when it comes to special abilities. X Factor. Before we throw these two Titans to face each other, there are a couple of things to note about their personalities. As mentioned earlier, Rodan has an issue when it comes to making what we would consider wise decisions, putting himself at risk repeatedly without thinking of the instant repercussions. This temperamental Titan will once again be at risk of making a decision that could cost it its life. Camazotz, on the other hand, is a Titan who is known to fight dirty, resorting to maneuvers and weapons that are not initially visible to the opponent, making him look a bit vulnerable at first, but against a Titan who tends to underestimate his enemies and wastes no time to attack, a reserved approach to combat could also cost it its life. In this particular scenario, and for the sake of fairness, Camazotz will not be provided with his army of smaller minions. This will in turn allow Camazotz to focus fully on his opponent, even though during combat he proves to be a pretty good multitasker. Today, Rodan will only worry about Camazotz, which frankly is enough trouble already. It is now time to determine which of these Titans will win in a fight to the death. Rodan, with its incredibly wide build and strong character, wins the edge in resistance, speed, stamina, and special abilities. Camazotz, the Vampire Titan, wins 3 important edges in terrain, intelligence, and melee weaponry. Both of these Titans are equal when it comes to maneuverability and bite effectiveness. This fight will take place in the deep cavernous pockets leading into the Hollow Earth. In this scenario, Rodan is attracted to the volcanic-rich terrain found below, but in order to get to it, he must fly through Camazotz territory. For better visibility for your viewing, the light in this rather dark environment suitable for Camazotz will be adjusted for an improved spectator experience. It is now time to fire this simulation. The combatants are ready. Coming up, Titanus Camazotz versus Titanus Rodan. As seen in this battle simulation, it is none other than Titanus Rodan who managed to survive this fight. After taking a look at the battle results, we find that flying speed and durability were the determining attributes that granted Rodan victory in this face-off. During this, both Titans were able to inflict damage to each other. Camazotz, however, was the one inflicting more hits because of his higher number of weapons at his disposal, except Rodan was able to live through all of this because of its endurance and armor, and even going as far as injuring Camazotz thanks to its biovolcanic nature. But the most important attribute here was speed. A literal flying volcano traveling at twice the speed of sound would inflict nothing other than a fatal impact using the tips of these weapons. Additionally, it was his streamlined shape that allowed it to cut through any resistance emitted by Camazotz's screech. This was in fact a very difficult fight for Rodan, but in the end it was the fire demon who prevailed. It will take something special to defeat the flying magma beast. Special thanks to our team of researchers, animators, and artists that helped bring this episode to life. If you want to support the channel, know who will fight next, and get in on some cool behind the scenes, please join our YouTube memberships. For more info on these videos, go visit gojicenter.com to view fun follow-up info on these fights.